Conjure in your mind the most contemptible figure you can imagine. A singular miscreant who inspires repugnance in all who lay eyes on him. He is rotten to the core, concerned only with gratifying his perverse pleasures without regard to those around him. Certainly the type you or I would take great care to avoid. There's only one problem. We can't, because he dwells in all of us, and without him, we cannot survive. An upstanding man of learning seeks to separate the evil from the virtue in himself, presumably for the sake of good, but the consequences are horrific. Robert Louis Stevenson's strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde has displayed tremendous staying power in the years since its publication, and we would do well to keep it close to our hearts, lest we embolden the darker element in us all. I'm Tyler Martin, and this is Monsters from the Id. The image of a noble scientist downing a bubbling potion and transforming into a hideous, iniquitous second self is, of course, familiar to most. But for those who merely perceive the tale of Jekyll and Hyde as a quaint fable of science gone wrong, or who have only a passing familiarity with the story, perhaps from a multitude of film and stage adaptations, it is instructive to go back to the source. Stevenson opens this 1886 opus with the efforts of the lawyer Utterson to get to the bottom of his longtime friend and client Dr. Henry Jekyll's connection to the sole beneficiary of his will, a known scoundrel named Edward Hyde, who has been running roughshod about the streets of London. Utterson supposes that the good doctor has become involved in something unseemly and is being blackmailed by this ruffian. Things reach a peak when Lord Carew, a well-liked member of Parliament, is murdered by Hyde using what is soon confirmed to be a cane belonging to Dr. Jekyll. The villain mysteriously vanishes, and a positive change is observed in the doctor, who becomes more sociable and takes care to do as much good as possible. However, a few months later, he suddenly goes into seclusion, holing up in his laboratory and refusing all visitors. His old colleague, Dr. Lanyon, with whom he has not spoken for years due to disagreements over scientific matters, takes gravely ill due to an apparent shock in connection with Jekyll, handing Utterson a letter to be opened upon the death or disappearance of their mutual friend. Soon after, Lanyon passes away. Their suspicions having reached fever pitch, Utterson and Jekyll's butler Poole break into the lab and discover the body of Hyde, dead of apparent suicide and clad in Jekyll's clothes, along with a letter from Jekyll. Upon reading both missives, Utterson discovers the horrible truth. Jekyll and Hyde were one and the same. We learn that the doctor, long having buried his private sins under a carefully cultivated veneer of respectability, had sought a way to separate his better and worse natures once and for all through careful experimentation with drugs. The resulting tonic allowed him to transform into a completely different entity. The conscientious Henry Jekyll, a big man of around 50, became a much smaller and younger individual who gleefully embraced sin and vice, Edward Hyde. In this form, he reveled freely in all manner of debauchery, knowing that he could once again don the likeness of the doctor with another drink of the serum. It was witnessing this transformation that drove poor Lanyon to his grave. After the murder of Carew, Jekyll realized the danger of his reckless actions and resolved never to take the potion again, but eventually the urge overtook him, and he soon began changing into Hyde involuntarily, even without the drug. Progressively larger doses of the devilish concoction were required to return to the form of Jekyll, until at last the transformation became permanent. Dr. Jekyll had, in effect, died. Unable to regain the safe refuge of his other self, Hyde was finally driven to take his own life. Couched in the brisk, fluent storytelling that has made Stevenson such an enduring favorite, this masterwork is noted for its exploration of a fundamental struggle that has been central to human experience since before the dawn of history. In the words of Jekyll, "Strange as my circumstances were, the terms of this debate are as old and commonplace as man. Much the same inducements and alarms cast the die for any tempted and trembling sinner, and it fell out with me, as it falls with so vast a majority of my fellows, that I chose the better part, and was found wanting in the strength to keep to it." The doctor refers, of course, to the duality of human nature, the clash between the good, which promotes harmony and enables us to coexist with our neighbors, and the bad, which indulges primal desire and places the self above all. This invites a look at some basic psychology and one of this channel's founding principles. According to the Freudian theory of personality, the human mind consists of three basic parts: the aggressive, instinct-driven id, which seeks pleasure; the ego, which works to balance the illogical demands of the id and the requirements of the real world; and the superego, home to the conscience and the basis of laws and morality. It is worth noting that although psychology as a discipline was in its infancy at the time of this novella, and it would be some years before these ideas would be thus codified, the thinking behind them was already established, and Stevenson wields it here to striking effect. The book sees all three of Freud's components represented with vivid clarity. The story begins with Utterson taking on the role of superego, bringing his finely honed logic and morality to bear in an effort to get to the bottom of the mystery, driven both by a sense of duty to his profession and a deep concern for his friend. Dr. Jekyll is the ego, bedeviled by internal strife between the positive and negative aspects of his personality. Seeking to fully embrace his better nature, he makes a tragically misguided attempt to divide the two. And Hyde, of course, is the archetypal monster from the id, a brutal, unnatural entity who delights in iniquity and whose very visage elicits immediate revulsion. Pointedly, when reassuming the form of Jekyll, the Doctor is still himself, whole and complete, with all his good and bad qualities still intact. Only Hyde is pure, and once indulged, becomes the stronger of the two. But even when he prevails, it becomes obvious that he cannot survive without Jekyll. Thus it is impossible to truly divide ourselves from these warring elements within us. We must learn to live with them. Given the wide diversity of personalities and proclivities, different individuals will of course find different ways to address this difficulty. Whichever approach we choose is reflected in our personal attitudes. In the course of the story, we find the idealistic Jekyll, whose scientific pursuits gravitate toward the mystical and transcendental, coming into conflict with Lanyon, who holds strongly to the material and rational aspects of their shared vocation. In reference to his colleague's conservative point of view, Jekyll twice uses the word hidebound, a clever play on the author's part, for, as we come to learn, Jekyll is himself hidebound. With all these themes and ideas established so explicitly, it is intriguing that Stevenson chooses to remain vague about the actual transgressions committed by the title characters. We know nothing of the nature of the temptations and vices that so disturb Jekyll and drive him to pursue the fateful separation, only that they exist. Utterson indicates that the Doctor was wild when he was young, and surmises that he is being visited by the ghost of some old sin, but details are notably lacking. The passions of youth are of course well known, but vary widely between individuals, leaving the reader to infer what they will. In the case of Hyde, we know that he has thoughtlessly trampled an innocent young girl and murdered Carew in cold blood. Apart from these incidents, we are given only a suggestion that a multitude of other offenses have been committed, the nature and scope of which are left to the imagination. The numerous adaptations of the story invariably add elements of love interest and other obvious avenues for Hyde's depravity, but sitting alone with Stevenson's original work, we are left to fill in the blanks, and in the process perhaps learning more about ourselves than we care to admit, just like Jekyll himself. After all, his dilemma is ours as well. The coexistence of the good and the bad in us is fundamental to our humanity. Like it or not, we are each one of us hidebound, and how we cope with our deepest, darkest impulses is entirely up to us. The question of how best to manage this predicament has been key to every ethical, philosophical, and religious teaching in history. Buddhists seek liberation from selfish desire, which is linked to harmful thoughts and actions, and is seen as the root of all suffering. The Christian Bible denounces selfishness, praises humility, and exhorts readers to place the needs of others first. While some influential schools of thought place paramount importance on self-interest, it can scarcely be argued that unchecked pursuit of self-centered impulses can quickly lead to disastrous consequences for ourselves and the people around us. What may start as a seemingly innocuous wish for wealth or pleasure can easily spiral out of control. How many fortunes have been squandered in casinos? How many lives have been brought to ruin by the need for the ultimate high? Any one of us could fall victim to the temptations that lead down the dark paths of gambling addiction, substance abuse, and a myriad of other common vices, paths that can very easily lead to our undoing. Many weaknesses stem from a primal part of the psyche that is linked to self-preservation. Aggression, for example, normally begins as a response to a perceived threat. Lust is born from the biological imperative to procreate. These and more are basic components of human experience and need not always be viewed in a negative light. But with even one misstep, one unfortunate circumstance, they can result in any number of heinous misdeeds. Freud himself argued that civilization is built on the repression of the primitive instincts that drive the Hydes among us to unspeakable acts. By creating laws which forbid such offenses, we are able to survive and entertain notions of hope. But in attempting to bring these impulses to heel, we risk the festering resentment of the most selfish, irrational elements in ourselves, a resentment which can at any time erupt into untold chaos and suffering. Attempts at moral order are never airtight, and there are always those who seek opportunity. How many company executives and political leaders have risen to the very top and maintained their positions by way of trickery and deceit, by breaking the backs of the very people who made their ascent possible? Just like Hyde, they have no real regard for laws, consequences, or even decency. But unlike Hyde, they are often met with the fawning adoration of those who see their own self-centered impulses vindicated by these perceived successes. Thus, the appetites of the id are hardly limited to individuals, as various identity groups and even modern civilization itself continue to pursue courses that, in the name of self-preservation, ultimately threaten self-destruction. How many of the crises we face today, war, famine, unsustainable resource depletion, climate change, can be attributed directly to the quest for selfish gain? By viewing other people, other societies, other species, even the planet itself as mere tools to be exploited for the sake of our own comfort and satisfaction, our own narcissistic glory, we place our lives and well-being at grave risk. Rules and laws are not always enough. Reflection and empathy are not always enough. There are no easy solutions. If we are to deal with these problems responsibly, we must begin by acknowledging that the selfish, hateful elements that threaten us do not and cannot exist only in some despicable other entity, separate from ourselves, but deep within our own souls as well. This conflict is our burden to bear. To deny this basic fact is to deny our humanity. And without that, what are we? So how about you? If you were to give full vent to your base desires with no fear of reprisal, what would you do? Steal? Kill? Perhaps the Hyde in you might even feel compelled to like and subscribe for more Monsters from the Id. As always, thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.